Introductions are everything. Do them right and you're sure to hook people, but a poor one leaves a bad impression. With games, this is no different. Just by taking a quick look at Steam badges shows how many people don't even get a game's first achievement. And for a game like TDX that needs all the new players it can get, it's beyond important to show them what the game has to offer. But as someone who's gone through the game's whole progression, its best offerings really are at the end of the game. Now, why is this a problem? I mean, naturally the game's going to build up over time as you get better towers. You don't play Nightmare as your first mode for a reason. But the issue is that TDX's introduction is, for the most part, really out of date, by like over a year and a half. It no longer shows what the game is actually like. It's no question that TDX has grown over its lifespan. Take the original version of Expert Mode and compare it to now. From a gameplay standpoint, it still serves as the most difficult of the original 4 modes with the best per run rewards of them and the most challenging gameplay. But the modern version does some very key things to take the experience to a whole new level. Things that are still lacking from easy and intermediate. And the experience a player has their first time playing a game is critical because, well, it's their first time playing. And I think that TDX has stepped up so much that it isn't putting its best foot forward with new players anymore. One of these things modern TDX does so well is audio. Audio and sound design is a core pillar of making a game work effectively. This can be best seen in things like horror games where audio design can really make or break them, but it applies to all games nonetheless. To prove my point, let's take a look at this gameplay. Now compare that to this. There's a huge difference between the two, and it's pretty clear which one is better. The background music of Elite, Expert, Halloween, Christmas 2024, and luckily the tutorial took the game's soundtrack to a whole new level. Not only does each of these modes have a full soundtrack, but these are genuinely great tracks. The GJ, Aaron Prevails, and Devbag have made TDX's soundtrack into something people will remember. Playing modes without music, like Easy and Intermediate, don't hit nearly the same without the added atmosphere. It's honestly a lot more boring to play these. Even the Tower Battles event suffers from this, and that mode is much more fun than Easy or Intermediate. Only having boss soundtracks just doesn't cut it anymore when the standard for quality tower defense games is so high. But background music isn't the only type of audio I'm talking about. Enemy sound design is another big thing. Compare Mark II to Mark II Plus. Here's Mark II. Now, here's Mark II Plus. Now, none of this is to say that Eradicator Mark II and the rest of TDX's release content was bad. It's still, by all means, better than the vast majority of TD content on Roblox. But there's a clear winner when it comes to these two bosses. And the visuals have had an equally as large step up in their quality. Again, looking at Mark II compared to Mark II Plus, there's a big difference. I know I've only been using this for an example so far, but it really is the best way to see it. And you might have your own opinions, but I think that Mark II Plus is the objectively better looking boss. For a second example, compare Christmas 2023 to Christmas 2024. In fact, comparing any of the game's content before Endless Mode to after Endless Mode shows just how much more detailed it is. Beyond the change in style, the newer enemies simply look better than the older ones. Taking a look at these older enemy designs, you can really see how the game has changed over time. The most notable thing is the textures. They really change how the game looks for the better. It gives them so much more detail and polish. The older enemies don't even have real clothes sometimes, and this really does affect how people perceive a game their first time playing it. And again, this isn't a diss on the game's older content, the new stuff is just far and away better. TDX in the current day has pushed their own bar up so much that the game is no longer showing what it's actually like to players. Easy and Intermediate are too outdated from at least a visual and audio standpoint, and for those reasons, I think they deserve their own overhauls to their graphics and sounds. The modes are also pretty outdated when it comes to gameplay, so adding in some changes to the wave structure, resistances, and anything else that can use a refresh isn't a bad idea either. Resistances are a real sore spot for these older modes. Even though Ranger has 3 damage types and the ability to ignore resistance, Easy Mode has no enemies with resistances. Players already learn about and handle resistance in the tutorial, so there's absolutely no reason to not have it in Easy Mode. Easy Mode should now include tower deaths too, since players experience it from the tutorial as well. It makes no sense to have it be absent from the first real mode in the game. It's currently serving as a step back from the tutorial. I get the fact that easy mode originally was the game's tutorial, but even back then it was still lacking, since once again there are no resistances or tower deaths, and in the current day, this problem has just been exacerbated. Intermediate resistances are better than easy if only by a little, since the only resistances are bullet, explosive, and ice. These resistance amounts are also extremely high, being 85% or more and serving as hard counters to towers that use their respective damage type. And while hard countering towers isn't inherently bad, the way they went about it isn't the best. All three enemies with bullet resistance are there to completely counter bullet damage. Not letting the player solely rely on one damage type is good, and I encourage it, but there should also be enemies with resistances that aren't so high that they completely stop a tower from being useful. Instead, they should serve to make a tower less effective than others by using lower resistance amounts. This is something that modern TDX has once again done better with enemies like Knights, Golden Knights, X-Soldiers, and Heavy Titans. These enemies don't prevent a tower from being useful, but instead encourage the other damage types more. And while resistances will stay more limited since players don't have access to all damage types yet, I think improving how they're handled in these modes will only benefit players. On top of all this, the rewards for losing have to be increased in all modes. There's no excuse for how much you get punished for experimenting and not having meta towers and a strat dog. If you haven't seen, Chris the Bro made a really good video on how TDX's losing rewards are so much worse compared to TDS. These low rewards can genuinely waste people's times when they lose, which makes them not want to play. And people who aren't fans of a game are simply going to quit when it gives them nothing for their time. It's not so much about beating the mode as it is playing it and putting in effort. It should be something enjoyable no matter what and reward your time. Another thing is that there's no real incentive to do the tutorial. People should feel like the tutorial is something there to help them, but it doesn't give them any rewards. Most often, people will end up skipping it. I think giving them a little bit of gold could be a good way to get more players to do the tutorial, and when I say a little bit, I mean a little. It would be 100 or maybe even 150, something just small enough to let them get shotgunner after an easy mode win. This would help players get started on the already intense grind of TDX, opening up intermediate mode to new players a little bit earlier. Remember, new players will want to progress quickly since the game hasn't fully grasped them yet. Making them feel like they get nowhere is how you get people to leave. Additionally, intermediate is a more fleshed out mode where the game's mechanics can be better used, and frankly, it just has cooler enemies like Eradicator. A lot of the time, it feels like the game is focused on the endgame players rather than all of them, especially when we have towers like Golden Mobster and Combat Drone released back to back, and Nightmare on the edge of release. Supporting your dedicated players who have already beat the game isn't a bad thing, but neglecting your new ones is. Anyways, I just wanted to talk about how TDX seems to be dropping the ball by not overhauling easy and intermediate mode. This game should be putting its best foot forward for all players, but especially for new players where it matters most. Ghost LD made a video about the same topic, so go watch that too. And here's another video where I talk about how TDX could be better.